right, so for the news this week, let's first just kind of catch up a little bit because we skipped a week. Is there anything with the Kairat or Leeds matches that we didn't cover and follow up, or towards the beginning of the show that we want to talk about? Like, for instance, Arsenal finishing the Champions League phase without a blemish on our record. That's pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. Yeah, we went 8 for 8. I'm darkly amused by the fact that Kairat scored more goals against Arsenal than Bayern Munich or Inter Milan.
Yeah.
Granted, one of theirs was kind of a gimme at the end of the game, which probably really shouldn't have happened in a lot of ways.
And the other one was a penalty that Calafiori never should have given up.
Well, the other one was a penalty that Calafiori, it was one of those, as soon as you watch it, you go, what are you doing? Yeah, it was an obvious penalty.
Yeah.
I think that was a game. I think we sort of played that in second gear. I think that game could have easily been 5-0. But you know what? Congrats to Kairat. It was, they got to finish their Champions League campaign playing playing at one of the premier grounds against one of the clubs. I think probably their big moment was because Real Madrid was the big team that drew the short straw and had to go out there.
Yeah.
But to play Real Madrid at home was a great experience. Apparently, James McNicholas, Gunnerblog in the Arsenal space, for that game actually watched the game amongst the Kairat fans, went into the visiting section and watched the game with them. And it was, they said there were as many Kazakh flags as there were Kairat stuff. And it was just a good moment for a lot of Kazakh expats and descendants who were in, to sort of have a moment to celebrate a Kazakh team being in the Champions League. And it was a fun night for them, even with the result.
Yeah, definitely.
In a sense, the result didn't matter for them.
Well, right.
And aside from their being eliminated.
It's also funny. One thing worth mentioning quickly that I didn't realize until we played them and I was listening to the commentators speaking is apparently in Kazakhstan, their schedule is similar to what MLS has here for the time being until that changes next year, where they play a single calendar year schedule. So the Champions League, just about in its entirety, was mostly in their off season. That has to factor in with these players who are mostly resting, and then they get together every few weeks to play a Champions League match in the off season. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I don't think though that plays into their performance. Let's not over romanticize this. There's a reason they're the first ever Kazakh team to reach this level, and we'll say the group stage. We'll call it, thinking equivalent to the old group stage. There's a reason they're the first Kazakh team to make it this far. Yeah. And the calendar is not the reason why. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Maybe too charitable, but. Yeah, interesting to think about.
But it is a weird thing, obviously. Yeah. But and it does fly in the face of the idea that, and I get why MLS is changing. We've talked about that, but I don't think the calendar year schedule that MLS was working with it's not as if it's never been done before in world soccer. It's just it is outside the norm of the biggest leagues and the ones the MLS wants to be compared to, and ultimately sort of that kind of universe they want to be in. MLS doesn't want to be in the same conversation as the Kazakh Premier League. I think that's fair.
Right. Also, during that match, we had a couple youth players we haven't seen play before. You want to tell us a little bit about those two young lads?
Well, I can tell you their names, which is about all I can tell you about them. Ife Ibrahim and Brando Bailey Joseph both came off the bench at the end of the Kairat game. Kairat scored a goal basically right before the final whistle with two 18-year-olds on the pitch for Arsenal. But a great experience for them, great moment for them. We've talked about this a little bit with Wanyeri and Lewis Skelly, but also with Max Dowman and others, for academy players to see that there is potentially a path to play with the senior team out of the academy is a good thing. And, it's fortunate that we're in this position that those guys can get those opportunities in a stage like this with the stakes being so low. They're not in there because we've been wiped out on injuries and they're all we've got. They're in there because the game is over. This phase of the tournament is over. Go ahead, have 5-10 minutes. We're in a strong enough position they can play there, and I've said this before. Arsene Wenger used to say that with young players, you pay in points. And then we're in a position where we don't have, there really is no penalty for us in that regard, which is good to see.
Yeah. So then, as someone who literally slept through the Leeds match knowing that we weren't going to cover it, what should I know? Tell me about the Leeds match.
The Leeds match, it's nice to know that we're going to beat the heck out of some teams here and there. 4-0 was nice. 4 goals from 4 different players. I'm just looking through there. Honestly, the biggest thing to come out of this game, news-wise, was the injury to Bukayo Saka that he picked up in the warm-up.
Right.
And Noni Madueke was a late start, and then he scored, which is interesting. So his goal was actually first given as an own goal. It came in as a corner, and the keeper went out to play it, and he botched it and knocked it into his own net. Partly because he collided with and was sort of run into by Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who Leeds striker. Then after the game, we just mentioned this the previous show, right? That review board that looks at those goals actually changed that and gave Madueke the goal, which I think is fair. That ball's going in. That's an Olympico. Right. And he was unlucky the way that got played, but otherwise, yeah, we dominated, and that's we talked about how that's not an easy place to go. Ellen Road and Leeds are a tough team and all that, and then we went up there and won a fairly uneventful game, to be honest. I mean, minus all the goals.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, it was good. I was happy each time I woke up and saw that we scored again. So this interval, I was going to say this week, but this interval during which we didn't record also saw the close of the January transfer window. So what happened? I think Arsenal didn't make a lot of big moves like we thought they probably wouldn't.
Yeah, well, they didn't really make many moves in general. Really 3 of note we should mention. The first one is the official sale of Alexander Zinchenko, not to Nottingham Forest, where he's been on loan and barely played. He was, in fact, officially sold to Ajax, and I don't remember the number, but it was the number in my head. I don't want to confirm this. Don't take this as the gospel truth. The number in my head was like $1.5 million, which is a lot less than we paid for him. I hope he finds better luck in the Netherlands than he's had here with England. Obviously, with Arsenal since leaving City. I mean, some of it was injuries. Hopefully he can get healthy and still be a useful player at this level, which clearly he wasn't. Forrest didn't see him that way, unfortunately.
Just a quick question on that, though. So that's interesting. I forgot that he was on loan this season, and we've just kind of transferred him over to another club. He still plays out the rest of the season with Forest, and then Ajax is able to decide what he does after that, right? Or
no, I don't believe so. I believe he transferred. Because he was technically, it's so weird to say this about people, right? He was technically our property. And I think part of the reason this was done is because he just wasn't playing at Forest.
Oh, okay.
He didn't fit what they were doing. They didn't really have a use for him. And so I assume they agreed to that deal. So he is, as I understand it, he plays for Ajax now.
Okay. But do you know if that's generally the case? Like, are loans considered to be like through the next transfer window to potentially be renewed, or
no? Loans are they? I mean, remember, take last year when we had Raheem Sterling on loan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that ended, and everyone was like, "Yeah, this isn't going to work,"
right.
And we just sent him back. There has to be a mutual agreement. Sometimes you'll see it's a loan with an option to buy or loan with an obligation to buy.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Zinchenko was at the end of his contract, so there was nothing at the end. And I think if this deal doesn't come up, he's probably a free agent at the end of a free transfer. He's free to sign with anyone. As speaking of Raheem Sterling, he is also apparently out of contract now with anyone. So,
yeah, that's unfortunate for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Father Time is undefeated.
Yeah, basically. So what about some youth events in our transfer window?
The couple of them. One, Max Dauman officially signed his pre-contract because of labor laws. He's not allowed to sign a contract until he's 18. So he signed a pre-contract, which basically, once he turns 18, then he's officially a professional with Arsenal and he'll start making the professional salary. But in the meantime, he's still a youth player. But that will happen when he turns 18 in like 2 years.
Right.
Oh, I'm so old. The other one, interesting, a transfer, someone a youth player, Evan Mooney, young Scotsman, was brought in from St. Mirren in Scotland. Apparently, we beat out Spurs for him. That's it. That's really all I got. He's 18. I don't really know a lot about him. Obviously, Arsenal thinks well of him, and I guess we have a decent track record of those things. He's also a youth player, so you never really know with kids at that age. But still, it's a I guess they feel good about him. So let's see how it goes.
It's interesting. I mean, in talking to people in our area, like in the U.S. in general, and specifically in this part of New York where I live, it sounds like that was one thing that is potentially holding us back from developing talent the same way that they do in England and elsewhere, where kids here sign up for whatever club they want to. Maybe there's tryouts, maybe they don't get in, but it's kind of up to them where they go. And you don't have this model of you belong to the academy, and if we transfer you, then we make money off of that. So basically, like, it's free to play. Like, if you go to the Arsenal Academy, you're not paying Arsenal. Like, they're essentially paying you, whether that's in money or more likely just in experience and training. But like, you're their asset that they're developing, and like that market around development makes a lot of sense to me.
Right. The difference really is we just don't have enough clubs.
Right.
Like we like just the US is just, of course, so large. England, on the other hand, has remember that pyramid, those have, they're not necessarily full-fledged academies, but you can go down. I mean, Wrexham, back when they were down in the National League in the 5th level, they had an academy. Like there are just tons of those options feeding into, and that's the way some of those lower clubs make money, right? They develop these players, they play a couple games in League Two, and some championship team looks at them and goes, "They're good. We'll take them, and here's the money for it." And that's how players one of the way players work their way up the ladder. The other side of this that you'll see a lot in the U.S. and I imagine some of the people you're in touch with know this system a little better than I do, but one of the things that they have in MLS is the idea of exclusive rights or exclusive areas. I forget the exact term. But basically, like in England, you can shop yourself around. Like, you don't have to play, like, just because you grew up in North London, well, you don't have to, your choices aren't necessarily Spurs or Arsenal, especially if you're not getting a call there. If Chelsea calls you up and says, yeah, you come on down. Okay, there you go. Go to Chelsea. You can go to Manchester City. I mean, obviously it's a little tougher when you're a kid, but you can. Whereas in MLS, they have more restrictive areas. Like a player going around you, I think they could go to New York City or they could go to Red Bulls. They couldn't suddenly be like, no, actually, I'm going to trek east and go to Foxborough and go play for the New England Revolution's Academy or whatever system is set up they have. I don't think they can do that. And so, but again, there's just not enough of those clubs with that kind of setup and that kind of money for those right. The amount of kids you have. And again, the money, the leagues just don't make it. There's just not as much money in the sport. There's plenty of money in the sport in the US, but not in the same way.
Right. And again, the clubs that there are too are so geographically spread out compared to England too. Makes a big difference.
Right. And again, too, remember, this is a system in England that's been developed over 150 years. I mean, whereas MLS and even MLS itself is a little over 30 years, and they haven't had these academies, these systems for all of that time. So this is all still relatively new in the US. It isn't the way every other American sport utilizes various kinds of amateur systems. I mean, traditionally the high schools, especially for sports like football, but basketball's always had AAU, baseball's had travel teams. Like, they've had these ecosystems already existing to bring players to the attention of the professional clubs who don't come into the picture until these kids are 17, 18 years old.
Right. They're not developing. They're just kind of seeing what's already been developed at that point.
Exactly. And there's a lot that goes into that too, about physical development and, the growth you can expect. Like, you could, it's very difficult. Well, it's almost impossible to be physically ready to play in American professional football at 18.
Right.
Like, you're just you're just too small.
Right.
So there's just a lot of layers that go into it. It's so very different than the way we typically develop talent between amateur and professional levels. They don't have that same kind of amateur ecosystem in Britain. Like they don't really do sports attached to schools in the way that we do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a different ecosystem these are coming out of.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, well, you touched on Saka's injury in the warm-up period before the Leeds match. Who else is on our injured list right now?
Yeah, we're going through it a little bit injury-wise. Also, Martin Odegaard is injured. Has been out for a little bit. Although this was from yesterday from Arteta. I talked about injuries to Odegaard, Saka, Jurrien Timber, and Max Dowman. Timber, he said Jurrien is fine, which makes sense. He played today.
Right.
When it comes to Odegaard, Martin is getting better. It will be a matter of days, we believe. So hoping to see him back, I guess, potentially even midweek against Brentford.
Right.
Saka apparently was a hip injury from warm-up. Said hopefully he will be with us very soon. We are in kind of a lull period in the schedule at this point, especially post Chelsea. So, we obviously today, recording this on Saturday. Today we played Sunderland. We'll have Brentford. We have Wigan on the weekend. We'll have Wolves the following midweek. So we're in kind of a period where you can be a little more flexible with your lineup.
Sure.
And that's not to say, I mean, we've talked about the quality that Sunderland has. Brentford has given us problems in the past. Okay, Wigan's in League 2. I'm not gonna, or League 1. I'm not gonna sell that one. But Wolves we talked about. But then we hit Spurs and Chelsea right after that. They're not City. They're not Liverpool. They're not quite those teams. And so I think there's a sense we feel like we can be a little more cautious with a player like Saka so that he's ready when we hit those important games in March and April.
Right.
And hopefully, and May, of course, and maybe June. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's good. So what about Marino? I was troubled to see that he's also injured. What's his status? What's the outlook on that?
Yeah, that one is a little sadder. Mikel Marino apparently has a foot injury. And he is out again. This was the story as it was about a week ago at this point, out for quote, a considerable period. The sense seems to be that it's, if he comes back, you're talking about a potential Champions League final. Like we're talking end of the season, like the very last, like we're talking end of May. If he comes back, if he's able to play. And so I think we're sort of in our head preparing ourselves for no Mikel Marino.
Right.
I wonder if it's a case where if it's working out, he gets a cameo in the final day of the Premier League season, especially if there's nothing on the line at that point. But that's probably your best guess. I would be shocked if we hit again if there is what's the word I'm looking for? A hypothetical Champions League final. I would be shocked if that's Mikel Marino's first action in 5 months, 4 months.
Right. We talked about that last season or the season before, possibly even with Marino specifically in the past. But yeah, how if they haven't played for months, you're not going to bring them back for a high stakes situation like that.
And to add in too, I mean, he plays for Spain with the World Cup this summer. I mean, not that he's going to be sitting there saying, well, I mean, I'd rather win the World Cup with Spain than, win the Champions League with Arsenal. I think he's probably looking at this and going like, if I'm not ready to contribute and there's a risk that I could hurt my, further damage on the eve of the World Cup, that's going to play into, I think, a lot of people's calculations as well. Whereas I'm sure Spain is sitting there going, no, you know what? He's done. He doesn't have to play in the Champions League final. That's fine.
Right. Yeah. Meanwhile, I hear there's some news with the Arsenal ladies.
Yes, the Arsenal women have won the Women's Champions Cup.
Cool.
Which
What's that?
Is yes. First, it is about $2.3 million. That's dollars converted from euros. So it's apparently the largest prize ever given out in women's club football. It is the inaugural version of what in the men's side is now called the Intercontinental Cup, but was the previous iteration of the Club World Cup, where the champions of the Continental Confederations play each other from the last year will play to determine a world champion. Arsenal, as the winner of the Champions League, was there. They in the final they faced Corinthians of Brazil, who was I guess whatever I don't know if they call it the Women's Copa Libertadores or whatever the equivalent is for the women there in South America. Gotham FC out of New York from the NWSL, that is the American League, was in the tournament. They finished in third. They beat ASFR of Morocco, who was the African champions. And those are the three. There apparently there are only four confederations. I guess Asia doesn't have a a Champions League style tournament between their confederations or between their countries,
their constituent countries, right? Interesting. So, quick side digression a little bit. So, the Intercontinental Cup for men's clubs still exists.
Yes, Paris Saint-Germain won it back in, let's say, mid-December is when that got played,
and that's annual then.
Yes, it was for a number of years. It had the name of the Club World Cup. That was the champions of each of those. Then, and FIFA has been trying to expand it with, of course, we saw the massive tournament that we had this past summer in the U.S. That it's anticipated the next version will be in 2029. And honestly, at this point, I think it's a pretty fair shout that Arsenal will be in it. Obviously, winning the Champions League would get you automatic berths, but because of how many points are given there to Chelsea, or excuse me, not to Chelsea, given to Europe. Sorry, but how many spaces there are available to Europe? I think Arsenal at this point has a fair shot at making it in, given the strength of our performance over the last two seasons. We're effectively halfway there to qualification. It's last year and this year.
Cool.
So that'll be keep an eye out on that for the summer of 2029.
All right.